Hi everyone, my name is Utkarsh and I'm the founder of Network Capital here with Neerja, who I got acquainted to through one of her writings. A friend of mine, another Network Capital member, Sanjog, actually sent me this article, and I was on my way to London, so I just saved it on my phone, and I thought I'll read it someday. And that someday happened to be last week. I read it, and it was just it was fascinating. So I looked Neerja up, and then said that, you know what, you should come on Network Capital and share a bit about yourself and the article and other adventures that you've been a part of. So today we're going to discuss the hustle culture, the influencer culture, and the digital spaces that we all inhabit, from LinkedIn to Facebook to Instagram and so forth. And I think Neerja has a very interesting uh, take there. So tell us, Neerja, a bit about yourself and how did this piece come to fore?
All right. So I'm very delighted to be here, Utkarsh, and I'm so glad that you read my piece and it resonated with you so much that you decided to extend this invitation. I'm really thankful. Also because your masterclass is it's quite the lineup of people. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to be here. So there are many different ways to answer that question, really, of how I got down to writing that article. And to be honest, I wrote it across 2 evenings. So it's something that came about very quickly, and something that I've been mulling over it for quite some time, to be honest. So I never spent any time on LinkedIn because not a lot of journalism work happens on LinkedIn. I
On
think it's
LinkedIn, yeah.
that's dominated by people from entrepreneurship or the corporate world. But occasionally I'd sign in because someone would be asking for my work ID, or there'd be like a junior writer or some college student who wanted to know about the world of journalism. So off and on, I would log in to kind of get in touch with these people who had messaged me. And then there was a point where there was a potential employer who got in touch over LinkedIn. And then for some reason, that conversation just kept happening on LinkedIn. It never moved on to email, or it never moved on to WhatsApp or something. And over the course of sending them my CV and talking about salary expectations and all of that, I keep having to return to LinkedIn, which is when I started looking at this world where, where the kind of posts that I described in the article, I started coming across them,
Yeah.
where,
So
people are
tell us
writing about
a bit about that article, because many of our listeners and readers are not from India, so they may
right,
not
yes.
be familiar with it. And then just if you could summarize the article and then
Sure.
paint a picture of the LinkedIn land, I think it'll be illuminating for the world.
All right. So it's published on a website called Array, and it's a piece about LinkedIn and also places outside of LinkedIn, other types of social media, where there are people who are either established leaders in the corporate world, entrepreneurs, or just thought leaders, really. And there are, of course, people who are aspiring to be like that, so who are modeling their behavior on these people. And it's a world where everybody's constantly talking about self-improvement, which is a great thing in itself. Self-improvement is not a bad thing. I'm not going to demonize it or anything. They talk about the things that they take inspiration from. There's a lot of conversation about philosophy. There's a lot of conversation about, things happening in the workplace, but all of it is extremely templatized. It's almost copy paste. There is a certain way of behaving, and there's a strangeness to each of these things. For example, when it comes to taking inspiration from something, or taking life lessons from something, it's usually very mundane things. It could be something as mundane as the juxtaposition of a regular currency note with a currency note that's extremely crumpled up,
I
and
fell
people
off
on
my
LinkedIn will
chair
be
when
able to
I
take
saw that.
inspiration from that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and also, I think that it's in a sense promoting a kind of toxicity, because it's making these basic acts of empathy or goodwill at the workplace seem extremely radical,
Right.
while also ignoring the more problematic parts or the more toxic parts of Indian workplaces, which we know are pretty unhealthy anyway in India. The idea that you should work overtime, the idea that you should work on weekends, the idea that you should put your life aside in order to be able to pursue work. And a lot of that work is not even individualistic, it's for someone else. So we already, I mean, that sort of thing is really messed up in India anyway, and now it's being heralded as the way to further your career on LinkedIn, which I found very intriguing and very amusing also to a certain extent,
It
and I
is
really want to
funny. I
write
mean,
about it.
it's as funny as it is sad, which is why I thought your piece was, just like really well put together. Actually, it inspired me to write, a smaller piece on the same subject. One of the things that I talk about, it's called broetry on
Oh.
LinkedIn, which is bro plus poetry. I don't know if you mentioned the word or not. And
No, I don't
broetry,
think. Fortunately or unfortunately, I have not come across bro poetry yet. But please send me some stuff. I'd love to read it.
yeah, yeah. Even I hadn't. My mom's a poet, so she'll obviously be illuminated when she comes across something like this. But yeah, LinkedIn subculture is actually a fascinating subject, and you, with a dash of humor and critique, walk us through that. What does LinkedIn and social media land look like? So, what is the title of your post, of your article on Array? Array
So
in
it's called
Hindi
corporate
means, I think it's a bit of a
influencers.
surprise, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So it's called corporate influencers, the new monks or the monks of today. And I think my editor and I kind of honed on to that aspect because, like you said, bro poetry has become a thing now. So has this dishing out of gyan and philosophy. And I think pop philosophy has become pretty, it's become pretty popular in
Hmm.
the last few years. It's always been popular, but now I think it's become a way to kind of show the world that you're
Yeah.
wise, you do things other than your business, or rather your business has led you to have
Hmm.
like these observations, and it's kind of molded your own persona, and now you have these things to offer up to the world. So that's kind of what we were honing in on, which is that, does everybody need to have a brand? Does everybody need to have a philosophy? Of course,
Hmm.
everybody has core beliefs, everybody has core principles about how they want to live their life or how they want to further their career. Everybody has that. But to kind of mold it into this saleable kind of thing, or to blindly follow someone else, why is that happening? And I was particularly interested in what is gained by doing all of this behavior, whether it is
Yeah.
the post about like inspiration, or is the post about, oh, I did something good for someone else, or this is how dedicated I am to my career, or this is my work philosophy. What are people gaining out of publishing this and posting it to the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is to be gained from this? And somewhere I began to wonder if this is overtaking the actual productivity that they create in their careers,
Hmm.
or the actual work that they do. So I
Yeah.
think that intersection of two things was very interesting to me.
Yeah. Did you actually speak to some of these corporate influencers slash monks who have a lot of wisdom for us?
So I didn't speak to some of the more common ones because I didn't know if they would be up for an interview or something. And also, there's so much material that's already there on their Instagram pages
Yeah.
or their LinkedIn profiles. I'll tell you what really sparked this in my mind. So, of course, I noticed this stuff when I was talking to that potential employer last year. But there was a point last year where someone approached me asking if I'll help them build like a portfolio for them over either LinkedIn or through a blog.
Hmm.
And I understand that communication is not everybody's strength, or
Forte. Yeah.
putting things into words isn't everybody's strength. And I think that's just how the world is. Not everybody needs to be a writer, and I get that. And then I was like, okay, that's fine, that sounds great. And this is someone who had a lot of experience in digital marketing. They had a lot of opinions about Instagram and how it can be used for sales and things like that, a lot of things which I didn't actually understand because this is not my area of expertise.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, cool, we can turn all of this material and all of this all of these nuggets of like wisdom and on hand knowledge into something that other people can learn from you. Most important, if you want to be seen as an expert, you have to put your opinion out there, right? That's like the basic way of
Yeah.
coming across as an expert. And he very confidently said, no, I think you should do your own research and come up with like the whole blog. And I was a bit flabbergasted because I was like, okay, you want to seem like an expert, you are denigrating people who write fluff on the internet, and now you don't want to give me any of your own expertise to be able to publish. So
Yeah.
you want me to just take whatever garden variety tips and tricks I find on digital marketing and put it into a blog? Where is the
Yeah.
originality? Where is the authenticity? Where is, I mean, the whole thing seems like a sham to me. In that moment, I was like, this is too much of a sham for me to
Yeah.
participate in. And that's kind of like when I sort of woke up to this phenomenon that there are people hired to do entire LinkedIn profiles of a lot of high profile people.
Yeah. And this is so fascinating what's going on. I think you got to give it to platforms like LinkedIn, because there was a time when when people largely use LinkedIn just to connect with one another. And I think still the dominant use case is that. But because of the engineers there and the algorithm, now they have made conversations a big part of how things happen. And they've actually started incentivizing people to like, comment, and make it a lot like Facebook in a way, which makes it very cringy to some people. But for some of these monks and influencers that you're referring to in your article, it's a gold mine for them, because they get to share poetry and all of the things like the crumbled note, the inspiration from it, and that hilarious account on Twitter, as you would have seen, crap on LinkedIn. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's funny because it's true. And I think the point that you make in your article is that it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something worth studying, and it's a bit funny. So tell us more about, as you went deep into this miasma of social networks, what started appearing to you? Why are people like, posturing to be so wise and monk-like online?
So I understand what your observation is about how these platforms are geared towards furthering conversation and actually inviting people to start conversations and others to carry forward that conversation. However, I do think any social media to a certain extent is what people make of it. For example, there's a reason why this didn't happen on an Instagram organically. Like I think eventually there was like a migration of all of these people to Instagram, where they started posting their own quotes as like posts on Instagram and
Yeah,
stuff like that. But I think it is to do with social mores. So once someone sets a certain way of talking, other people start emulating it because they see that it's successful.
yeah,
Like for example, on one of these crap on LinkedIn or one of these pages which are satire pages, basically, they've turned agree question mark into like this punchline. Like they'll say
yeah,
something extremely silly or they'll say something extremely like meaningless and they'll be like agree. So once something becomes a template or something becomes a more like a model that is successful, there are a bunch of people replicating it to the
yeah.
extent that you begin to wonder, did this inspiring conversation with a barista that this person met early in the morning before they went to work, did it really happen?
Yeah.
Or is there any
I for one,
in this
I don't
person?
believe half of these like barista stories, and I found a note on the road and those kind of stories, because um, it's just like, because I live in so many countries, I just noticed that how can people be meeting the same barista in 50 countries on the
Or Uber
same day?
drivers. Uber drivers seem to be like a fount of knowledge.
Uber driver, I mean, I never knew that so much philosophical knowledge was just like waiting to be found in the next cab I hail. But the same Uber driver is present in Delhi, London, New York at the same time, sharing all kinds of wisdom, which is, like, I never knew. Maybe we should have some of these as professors.
So
Um,
what you were talking about, the reasons for people to do this, I think they're multifarious. So I noticed that you pulled out this one part of my article and you spoke about it about, how the previous generation would have looked up to an entrepreneur who simply made a lot of money, kept
yeah,
the shareholders happy, showed like constant gains.
yeah.
But there's clearly been a sort of shift, at least within a
Yeah,
certain
and didn't give so
population of
much
people.
wisdom online because there was no
Yeah.
online, then just went about his or her work, made his or her shareholders happy, and lived life like a fancy rich person. Good job. This was, I think, the point that you make in one aspect of the article today, and because that part I pulled out, because how millennials and Gen Zs consume content and how they engage, how all of us, Gen Zs and millennials, engage in culture and commerce is a subject matter that's of deep interest to me. One, because my next book, I was telling you, Neerja, is on the same subject, passion economy. And second is because on network capital, the largest section of like people are millennials and Gen Zs. So it's like a subject that matters most to me. So tell me more about, what did you discover about millennials and Gen Zs and who they look up to, and how did you arrive at this punchy conclusion?
I think it's because they want to see people who are in these entrepreneurship positions or in these really high up corporate positions as being known for their humanity as well as like their ability at work.
Yeah.
And now that humanity has to a certain extent become manufactured, right?
Yeah.
I think when we talk about authenticity online, that's a very complicated subject. Someone might not be their authentic self, which they are in real life online, because they may be able to be a certain person online that, you know, their offline world doesn't allow. For example, if they're a queer person, maybe they can't live their full identity offline, but online they can, which to me
Yeah.
is a very liberating thing. So there are many different
Yeah.
ways of looking at authenticity, but here it's very clear that people are manufacturing authenticity to seem a particular way. For
Yeah.
example, the article, when I start the article, I start with the example of this man who was working in the ICU room where his wife had just given birth. You know, he
Yeah.
continues working mere
And he
hours
seemed
or
to be
days after
proud of
that.
it. Like what was
Very proud of
fascinating was
it.
that he was very proud of it. Yeah.
And I think there's one thing I underline, which is that there may or may not have been truth to the story. I hope that there wasn't truth to
I
the story.
hope there
He
was.
did
I was
help,
also saying the same
you
thing.
know,
Yeah.
with like raising the baby in those initial days, which are so important. So, like the baby so vulnerable in those days. I hope that he did pitch in as opposed to do this. But whether it happened or it didn't happen doesn't matter anymore, because what people are looking for, at least that post tells me, what people are looking for is for someone as dedicated as this to portray their dedication, to say that, you know,
Yeah.
I will not stop anything in my journey to finish my work.
Yeah.
So I think you know, there was a point about like 3 years ago where there were a lot of people talking about hustle culture and how it's
Yeah.
there's, you know, this constant race for productivity is kind of killing our productivity unintentionally. You know, the need to be
Yeah.
more and more productive is actually making you less productive because it's affecting your ability to do work. And now I think we've reached this point where people are, whether they're productive or not, trying to prove that they're constantly productive, whether they're kind or not, trying to constantly prove it. So I think perception is commerce. Like the way that you're seen has become something that you have to constantly sell.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when, you know, thought leaders or just these corporate gurus say, oh, you need to have a brand of your own, that's what they mean, that you need to have saleable aspects of yourself. And if
Yeah.
those actual aspects don't exist, what do? You manufacture them.
I think what you said, perception is commerce, is so true. Whether it's been true from the era of the Kardashians to Charlie D'Amelio, and do you know who she is? The D'Amelio
No, I
sisters
don't.
in the US. Basically, TikTok is banned in India, but Charlie D'Amelio and her sister, Dixie D'Amelio, are the most popular TikTok stars in the world, or among the most popular. Charlie by far is number one. And they are obviously like lovely Gen Zs doing interesting things. But one of the things that we've like noticed while studying Charlie and Dixie is that for them, like, doing all of these performance and stunts and dance moves online leads to a serious amount of commerce. Now, everybody cannot be a Kardashian or a Charlie D'Amelio for a wide range of reasons. Maybe you don't dance as well. But on LinkedIn and other kinds of platform professional networks, the way to sort of set yourself apart is perhaps through gimmicks like these. And that's the point that comes across really well in your article. In a way, we are all Charlie D'Amelios and Kim Kardashian. And it's okay to accept it because, it's a fairly common phenomena now. And your article does a pretty solid job of explaining that. So, can you talk to me a bit more about is it across professions, across age groups, or is it like a particular kind of person who's gaming this race to build an online brand?
Right. So I think it's interesting that you asked me to compare industries, because the one industry I do know is my own, which is writing and journalism, right? And one of the reasons why these LinkedIn stories really like stuck out to me is because when I go to my social media or my timeline, whatever this app may be, there will be a lot of people talking about the everyday struggle of work, which is true, right? Regardless of what kind of work you do, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a perfect day. Most days, there is going to be something that is going to cause you anxiety, that's going to cause you trouble. And I used to see that a lot on my own timelines. You know, writers would be talking about how the pitches haven't been accepted, or how difficult it is to just start writing a story and things like that.
Yeah.
I didn't find any notion of struggle on LinkedIn unless it ended in a good story, unless it ended in like wisdom. Like there was nobody just bitching about the fact that they couldn't get something done today, and that's really irking them. So I do
On
think
LinkedIn, everyone has accomplished everything. That is true.
yeah, there is this constant push to accomplish things. I also think so. One of my friends was actually telling me, so she's a consultant and she works in like a super corporate environment. She was telling me that being on LinkedIn is part of her KRA now. So she has to be active over there. She has to post. So companies are also incentivizing this. And like you said, if a candidate wants to stand out, if a candidate wants to be seen as someone who can add their image to the company's own image, like kind of like compounding this sense of responsibility or interestingness, that's the kind of person who is aspiring to be an influencer on LinkedIn. That's the kind of person who's wanting to talk constantly about their work. So now, I don't think talking about your work in general is something that is limited to the corporate world or to the world of entrepreneurs. For example, as a journalist, if you want to have your work read, if you want to have your work to have some reach, you need to be present on social media to a certain extent. Of course, you need to do a great job. You need to be very, like your sense of conviction in your writing has to be great. Or you have to give people a lot of information. You have to give people information that is relevant to them. But you also have to publicize it on social media to a certain extent. You have to be accessible for people to have conversations with you. And this is true of any this is true of many professions. This is not just journalism or entrepreneurs. But I think this kind of way of, and also there's this other point I wanted to make. I'm sorry, I'm kind of stretching this a little bit. I think curating one's social media is something everybody does. Anybody with an audience does. You and I do it.
We may not Instagram looks like every other day I'm in a different country and my life is one big party, which I like to think it is. But everyone knows that cannot be the only truth. Everyone curates their social media. Yes, point well.
Exactly. I think the difference is when you curate your social media, either in a way that everybody else is doing it, so you're following the herd because you know that this will work, or there is a lack of conviction in what you're saying. The crumpled note thing, or people talking about how they helped someone in their office.
But do you want to tell our listeners what is the crumpled note story? And have you seen the tree, the twisted tree story?
There's a tree. The tree. Yes, some of my followers sent me that story. So I'm going to relay both stories. They're both very riveting stories. You will never guess where they're going. So there is this one post where there's a juxtaposition of a very neat note, like one that you've just gotten out of the ATM, and there's another note which is crumpled. And the takeaway from that story is that they both have the same value because they're both the same pieces of currency, and that we should not judge them based on their outer perception or their outer looks. Which is not something that I would have ever imagined. The other one
no normal human being would have ideally imagined. And on Twitter, somebody commented that next time I'm frustrated, I'm going to look at my crumpled $20 bill for inspiration.
Wow.
It was a joke. It wasn't crap on LinkedIn thing.
The tree one was funnier though, because I'll tell you what made the tree one funnier, because it is the sort of thing that you and I would send to each other and be like, oh, LinkedIn is definitely going to riff off of this. And that's exactly what happened. So there's this tree whose growth is stumped at the start, and it kind of struggles a little bit, and then it kind of spirals and it continues to grow. And people managed to turn this also into a success story. I mean,
they also, and there's this poor guy who actually commented saying that, oh man, I fear the day it's on LinkedIn. It's got to be hell when LinkedIn found out about the tree, and it did find out about that tree. It's just that your article, talks about something so important. And, on Network Capital, we are like a mentorship company. We enable people to restart their careers. So we do give a fair bit of gyan ourselves. But we try and give gyan based on actual research-backed stuff, or focused on how to enable others to succeed. And we are perhaps as guilty of all of this as well, which is what it makes it funny, right? If you can't laugh at yourself, you probably are not as funny as you think. But because it's so true, the phenomena that you've uncovered, from the tree to the crumpled note, I would like to believe that we have really not gone the tree and crumpled note route. But who knows? The world is life is long. What struck me in your article is that how self-obsessed or how self-obsession is being sold at a premium now. This whole genre of self-help is interesting. Like, I mean, I've written a whole book on, future of work, productivity, etc. And I would like to believe that the essence of that book is help others. How do you create frameworks to help others? Now, on LinkedIn, I wonder whether this self-help is designed to make the person giving advice look really grand, or is it really designed to help others? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Okay, so it's an interesting question for sure. And as someone who writes personal essays, I completely understand the whole projection of self constantly at the world and how that seems. See, I think that this kind of brand building and this positioning of philosophy, at least on the part of the person spouting it, is definitely, it's a portfolio building exercise. I don't know if it's more than that, unless their books actually have some substance, or the things that their lectures actually have substance. I do think it is possible for people who are listening to it to gain something out of it. They're obviously in it for a reason, right? For example, if the both of us are having a conversation and I feel disconnected at the end of it, I'm probably not going to ask you for advice again. But the fact that people keep returning back to it again and again, and part of it is because the person on the other hand is making themselves seem so successful that if you find it very difficult to kind of withdraw and think objectively and say, is this really making sense for me? Is this how I see my life? Do I also need to become a brand? Do I also need to emulate them to the point that my career becomes like them? I think there is and all of these lessons, they're not exactly, I don't know how much depth there is to it, to be quite honest.
Can you give me an example of some of the beautiful advice you've stumbled upon on social media? So these are vague words, as you talk about, which don't necessarily mean much, but give us examples.
So a lot of these examples are based on learning and how biases prevent you from learning properly, but there's no understanding of why that bias exists in the first place. So it's very pithy, it's very surface level. I don't know if there's a lot of depth to it. There was this one that really caught my eye, which was about lust, and about how the ephemeral state of lust and how you should not run behind it. I suppose the lesson at the end of it is that you should chase for more concrete things, you should chase for more permanent things, more meaningful things. And to me, it's just, why would you shame people for whatever they're interested in because it doesn't fit into your business persona or whatever? Or why are you shunning like an entire emotion or a state of being because it's a business lesson? So a lot of it is things like this. A lot of it is bar graphs, and a lot of it is very prescriptive advice, which I always find very, I have an issue with prescriptive advice or prescriptive
messages. Tell me why.
Because they tell you how to think. They don't expand your mind. They don't tell you there are other ways of thinking. They're saying this is how you should think. Why else is a business guru or an entrepreneur telling you how you're feeling in your relationships? I think that's a conversation you should have with your friends, with your partner, with your therapist to better understand. I don't think a business guru should be giving you advice about how to have relationships. So you see what I'm trying to say, right? There is this need to optimize philosophy that you build for yourself and apply it everywhere so that your followers feel like you're the be all and end all, that you're the person that they can rely on regardless of the situation.
Yeah. People call these things content writing now. Now you're actually a writer. So tell us the difference between, say, broetry and real content. What goes into, like dispensing wisdom on social media, vacuous wisdom, versus actually writing, say, would it be a 2,000 word, 1,000 word article that you just wrote?
I wrote about 15, I think. Yeah, 1,500 words.
Right? So what's the difference? How did you write? What was the process of crafting a satirical article with lots of nuances, which would perhaps piss some people off, and make others very happy, and gives a lot to reflect on some people? What's the difference?
So I have a slightly differing opinion from what you said. I think everything has become content, to be honest, right now. And journalists have also
just refuse to call broetry content.
Yeah, okay, fine. I think we can draw the line there. What pains me and what saddens me is that behind all of these like gurus and influencers, there is like a another freelance writer just like me who's sitting over there and like punching these words because they know that it's going to pay the bills at the end of the day. It's the reason that they're going to put food on the table. So I don't really have disdain for content really, but I can tell you about like my own process.
Sure.
This interview has given me the opportunity to actually dwell on my process because it's not something I get to think about every day. So for this article, like I told you, there was so much observation that was already there and it was kind of brewing in my mind. And I sat down and I decided that these are the kind of points I want to tackle, you know, whether it's the kind of language that people use on LinkedIn, or what are the examples that I want to use that will establish what I'm trying to say, that I'm not merely, like I'm not being hateful. I'm just saying that this is a phenomenon we need to address. Or the idea that, you know, are you talking about your work more than you are actually working? And what is your motivation for doing so? So I put together a list of points and I said, okay, this is how I want to expand on them. And I kind of wrote it down one evening. And then I
The
sent
skeleton was one evening. You put together a skeleton.
The skeleton and the writing both happened across like the evening to the night.
I see.
And then I sent it to my editor Manik, who very brilliantly sent across like multiple comments, asked me to elaborate on some things. He's the one who kept like prodding me to understand the whole point about philosophy and, you know, why are people behaving like this? Or he basically gave me a lot of like useful comments that I could like expand on in my article. At the end of it, yeah, that's how it got written across like 2 evenings. But I mean, so the thing is that I think because of writing across 5 years now, it's become a muscle memory kind of thing. I have a thought in my head. I've located a social phenomenon. I want to look into the fundamentals of it. How is it? How does it function? And then to look at why does it proliferate? That's kind of the way that I've looked at subjects like this, or productivity, or grief, or, you know, how women view their own bodies. So that's kind of my process for writing. But now you're giving me the opportunity to think a little deeply about why I wanted to write this piece. And I think technically this piece is about two things. One is how we work and how we view work. And the second thing is selfhood on the internet. So these are two things that I've been very interested in for a very long time. And I think that's how the article sort of came together.
Yeah. Now, help us with second order thinking. So on Network Capital, we encourage our subscribers, our students to think in terms of first order effects and second order effects. First order effects are obvious things that the article refers to. What are second order things? What are some things that people should take away from the article, but may not be obvious? Talk to us about the second order effects here.
Okay. So, like I said, my motivation to write this article was that I've been constantly thinking about the nature of work itself and also selfhood online. I think that all our identities online are constantly in flux with the very nature of the internet. You know, so back when you had like a LAN connection and you had to take off like your, phone at home in order to be able to use the internet, I think you'll remember it as being a place where it was like a playground. You could go over there, you could discover new things, you could talk about the most random things, and there was an audience for it, you know. After that, I think we began to put more and more of our identities online, which is through Instagram or Facebook. And, you know, every picture that you posted or every person that you became friends with, it became like this kind of participation online. And you kind of develop this understanding that, oh, I have an offline life and then I have an online life. And soon the internet came to your phone, where at the tap of a button, you could express yourself. And I think now it's very futile to say that we have offline identities and we have online identities. I think the two have kind of melded themselves to the extent where you can't truly really say that you're a different person here and there. It's become an extension of who you are in real life. And now I think we've reached this critical point, mostly because of influencer culture and to a certain extent also how we present ourselves online, where I think now that curation is going to get to a point where, I don't know, maybe will you recognize, if you employed a whole team of people to represent you online, would you be able to recognize your own identity online? I don't know. I think we've reached this moment, this kind of like flux, where everything we do is curated to a certain extent. And I understand that need for curation. I think it's a natural sort of thing to put the best parts of yourself online. But imagine if so much of it was manufactured. I don't know how these people are able to look at it and be like, oh, that's still me. You know, oh, that's me. So I think we've reached points. Yeah.
Although authenticity is spouted about so much, this is anything but authentic. And that's the irony of the times we live in. We love to talk about authenticity and go and behave in ways that will counter that. And I think with your offline online merging, with the metaverse and becoming more popular, you will see this our identity becoming even more challenged. I wonder what will happen to the influencer culture, in the times to come. My personal takeaway was that I don't think you're saying influencers are bad, or I don't think you're saying influencer culture is bad. I just think that you're pointing our attention to the fact that we are just posturing for commerce and peddling advice to make commerce happen. And it is not as subtle as we think. And that's okay. I mean, like, when did commerce become such a bad thing? But I think trying to couch it in something else is surprising to say the least. That was one big takeaway from my side. But again, like staying on the second order effects, do you think there are other reasons why people discovered why posturing online is become like bread and butter for them? Is something to it?
So I think that, I mean, of course, now things have changed a little bit. What with most of us working from home, so I don't know how many of us actually have a real relationship in the way that we would if we had an office, and if we could meet each other every day and have conversations and stuff. That being said, everybody still has a relationship with everybody they work with. I mean, if you have multiple calls every day, or if you have multiple Zoom meetings every day, you are developing relationships. You are participating in a company, you are participating in a workplace. I think the posturing becomes a little dangerous when that's all you do.
Yeah.
For example, the other day I actually read a really interesting post about a woman talking about how the company helped her transition from being an employee who was engaged to an employee who's on maternal leave, and the whole thing was done super gently. It was done super smoothly. It was done in a way where she was not meant to, feel like a burden to the company. It was not being made to feel like she was abdicating responsibility to have a child, which is the experience that unfortunately a lot of women go through. And so she was praising her company for doing that. And to me, that's actually a great way to use LinkedIn, which is that you're normalizing the fact that other companies can also do this if they actually just tried. So I think that here she's using LinkedIn in a way that is actually pretty effective. She's using
Yeah.
LinkedIn as a means to talk about her experience, which is pretty individualistic, but to also talk about how it's possible for the world to look like this. So it allows like women like me to think, oh, it would be great if my workplace also did this, or oh, this is possible. So I think in this case, there was a real life example which led to a LinkedIn example. If there's only LinkedIn examples of people talking to their baristas or people talking to people in their office and treating them well, and there's no actual change, that's what the tragedy is. That's where
Yeah.
the problem lies. Like, so many of the people who are posting this to gain, like to do this aspirationally, to gain more fame online, to, build this kind of soft power online, may or may not be actually doing good work in their workplaces. And there are people with a lot of power. There are people at, at least mid-level managerial positions, if not higher managerial positions, or they're aspiring CEOs, or they're people who are leading startups in really vital roles. If all they're doing is posturing online and they're not at least putting some effort into affecting change offline, I think that's where the problem lies. Because otherwise, it's just you and I critiquing a certain kind of influencer culture, right?
Yeah.
To me, I'm very alerted to the fact that these people may not be behaving this way offline because there's nobody to like, share, or comment or subscribe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Highly likely, and definitely worth studying. Have you found differences in the way men and women behave on social media platforms when it comes to peddling advice?
I think in general, men are more prescriptive in the things that they say. They're also more confident in the things they say, but that's across social media. I think there are plenty of women also doing the same thing. And also, the thing with women is that I think there are so few women in positions of power today, even though, there's been like a great leveling. There are more women just like in positions where they would not have been in the past, say about 10-15 years ago, but also female participation in the economy is rapidly declining. So I think it's great when women talk about the work that they're doing, or the kind of philosophy they have about work and stuff. So I don't know. I feel like women and men both participate in this kind of thing. Although we might be quick to judge women because, if it's the first time that this woman is a woman in this position, or it's the first time that she's making a great career leap, and if she's talking about it and she's talking about it in an authentic way, I think that's great, because there's so few women who are doing the same thing. So I don't know. I don't think there's a gender difference really, but there's a lot more business influencers who are men.
Yeah.
I don't know. See, there could be multiple reasons for that. There could be many men more in business as opposed to like women. Or maybe it's just the confidence to be able to talk like that online. I'm not sure. I haven't seen a gender difference to that extent.
Got it. A business influencer, can you paint a picture for us? Who is he or she? Is that person typically a CEO of a large company, or just help us understand what that person looks like and sounds like?
Right. So there is one example that I mentioned at the end of the article, which is someone who was apparently jolted awake at 5 o'clock in the morning, because he's a CEO of, I think, a startup or something. Previously, he was someone working in the marketing division of a company, and he was talking about how, I think it was an attempt at humility, because he was like, I woke up at 5 o'clock.
Oh, fake humility is big, by the way. Fake humility is amazing.
So he said that he woke up at 5 o'clock with the aim that he wants to close a deal today, and how sometimes he wishes that he wasn't at a CEO level, and how he wishes he could go back to being in a junior marketing position, because the high that he got out of closing deals was great. So it's that, I think. There's a lot of people from the startup world. I don't know if there's a lot of people of big businesses. I mean, even if they do have profiles, I'm fairly certain that they are run by agencies,
run by other people.
So there's not a lot of people who are in such high positions. I think a lot of it is mid-level. See, the thing is, this is aspirational behavior.
It's the mid-level.
Right?
That's also
the next journey that you're going to take as a worker. So I think there's a lot of people at that kind of mid-level position, or there's people someone who is running a startup or at a vital position in a startup. Maybe this is their way of securing investment, like a soft way to secure investment. It's just to say, oh, look at me, I'm so inspiring. Yeah. So
100%. I actually agree with your thesis. The people on top are usually not the one who are in the space. It's basically the climbers, for the lack of better words, are the ones who are doing it, and they are doing it perhaps to get to the next level. It could be through funds, it could be through customers, and you're not saying it's a bad thing. It's just an A thing. It's just perhaps it's better. Some people say that LinkedIn is the best social network because everyone is generally so positive. Do you have anything to add to that? How do you contrast it with other things? Because on LinkedIn, everyone has basically solved the puzzle of life. And maybe on Twitter, people are slightly negative. On Instagram, maybe they're envious. I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I think it's a very interesting question, which is, what is the general tone of a social media network? I think you're right about people constantly having a sense of accomplishment. And like I said before, even if they failed, usually the moral of the story is that they've learned something from their failure, or they've overcome it.
How very popular was it? I have not failed, I have tried.
Yeah.
It's a paraphrase on Edison, right? But they don't necessarily know that,
I think there is a kind of toxic positivity that is doing its magic on LinkedIn, which is to try to make the most of the situation. So there's this really cool essay by Gia Tolentino, which is in her book Chick Mirror. She talks about optimizing and how we as a generation have kind of reached the ultimate kind of optimizing that we're doing. So she actually presents it in the context of women, and how women, especially on Instagram, are trying to make their perfect lives seem very effortless. I think this is the business world's take on this kind of optimization, which is to make your success look absolutely effortless, or to make your effort seem like something that didn't take a lot out of you.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Like, I think there was a time when hard work was seen as like the pinnacle of success, which I think pushed a lot of people to kind of, work really hard at careers that they may not have been good at. And then they
Yeah.
kind of got disillusioned, and then they realized that, oh, you also need a certain amount of talent, you need a certain kind of aptitude to be able to pursue a certain career. Now, you want to be seen as successful without having done like the rigor of like so many failed interviews, so many like you don't want to be seen as like stuck at like point one. You want to be seen as like a winner. So
Yeah.
even when I see a lot of posts of people, I mean, I think it really speaks to the job economy right now, and just the way that, people are really like going through this really chaotic time in order to be able to find a job. And I see a lot of posts of like really painful posts of people saying, they went through 50 interviews to be able to secure like one job across like industries and companies and things like that. But the takeaway is always, I have job now.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's being like self-aware or thinking to say that, there is something really messed up if I have to give 50 interviews in order to be able to get a job. There is no looking within, there's no objectivity, there is no criticality, I think. And so if you have a lack of these three things, criticality, objectivity, and just self-awareness, you're going to have constant positivity. That's how it is.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed is that with the creator economy and the passion economy becoming more mainstream, all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., they all are incentivizing people to create more content through algorithms by having funds in place. And I think people are lapping it up and they are producing a lot of this content with standard market dynamics. But I think your piece also points out to the fact that if we are producing that much content, and if we are reacting that much, when are we processing? When are we able to actually build off of other thought? And I noticed that maybe you are pointing towards an important phenomenon. I have rarely come across an original thought on LinkedIn or on any social media. It's usually a quote by a famous person. It's a standardized template repeated, and maybe people are creative, but they're just burnt out because they feel the need to keep playing this content game in order to get likes, because for them it's sales strategy. I see all of this online posturing as a clear-cut sales strategy. Either somebody is selling consulting or selling a product or selling their brand. I have very, very few people, if at all, are writing or thinking to actually enable other people to get to their goals. Maybe some are, maybe it should become more common. But that's with the creator economy becoming more mainstream, I see that happen. But you are a freelancer, right? You recently became one. How's that affected your writing, if at all?
So I've had a really smooth sailing 3 months, to be honest. And I think that it's a function of privilege, and it's a function of having worked in newsrooms for so long and knowing people. And, that's what, right? Like, I think networking has become such a big part of our jobs that it's almost inevitable. And if you're not able to do it seamlessly, in the sense that you may be like a well-liked person who gets invited to the right parties, you meet the right people. If you don't have that kind of outlet, the only way to do it is LinkedIn. And like you said, the danger of the creator economy, and how everybody's basically a lab rat that's constantly spinning on a wheel. And these platforms have got everybody, performing this way. It's constant performance. That's what LinkedIn or any other social media, to a great extent, at least in this influencer templatized version, it is constant performance of your identity online. So to a certain extent, I think it's kind of sad that that's how things are. Maybe if people were a little more honest about the things that they said, they might find a higher success rate. Like this woman who spoke about her experience with maternity leave, or other people talking about how, they may have had certain learnings from a particular workplace that they want to take to their next job, things like that. So maybe people, I mean, it's going to sound very cheesy, but if they wrote from heart or they wrote from actual experience, maybe they would seem a little more credible. Maybe they would not seem as, I don't know, maybe they wouldn't seem as cookie cutter.
Templatized, right? Like if it's something is templatized, why do we go to a neighborhood coffee shop instead of, say, like a regular? Or why do you prefer, a food which is gourmet as opposed to something that is picked up from the freezer? One is templatized,
Yeah.
one has character. Yeah.
I think there is one thing to think about, and I really like the point you made about how, we're not slowing down to actually process what it is we're going through. Like, we're moving at such a fast pace on any social media that I don't know if there is time for reflection, which to me explains why so many people are constantly on social media breaks. Like,
Yeah.
people have to take time off of social media to truly get away from it. It's not
Yeah.
possible to have the apps on your phone and to completely ignore them. So I think a pertinent question to ask is, do you need to be this person?
Hmm.
Do you need to be the kind of person that's constantly portraying their life, their work beliefs, their philosophy? What are you really
With
gaining
with
out of
with
it?
that much confidence. That's also a
With
thing,
that kind
right?
of
Like,
rigor, with that kind of confidence, should you be taking a step back to try to formulate your philosophy to begin with?
hmm,
How should you be spending your time? Just because someone is telling you that this is the way to advance your career, is it true?
yeah.
And I think that kind of criticality is perhaps missing.
I think one thing that happened also with the pandemic is that everyone became like an advisor on careers, cricket, international relations, politics, medical sciences, vaccine. I think the expertise grew a lot more rapidly than one would have hoped. And some of these social media platforms, like they are businesses, so they had to sort of adapt to make all of this expertise uh, come to light. As you think about the future, as you think about the culture changing, if at all, do you feel that so far one has this posturing led to economic success on average, and in future do you think it will continue to lead to economic success for these creators, or will there be more cases of burnout? Because I have a theory that likes is not equal to dollars. So 10,000 likes does not mean that the person has really solved a problem, because when you have a circle tree giving wisdom, people might passively like something, but that doesn't mean that it's coming anything to you. Maybe I'm wrong, but what's your take?
I think, regardless of whether it translates into actual gains, I do think that these people will come across as enthusiastic workers, employees who will talk about the experience of working at your company. So, if you are an HR person looking out for people who will further the company's brand, I suppose someone with their own brand is an interesting mix to the whole
Yeah.
situation. So maybe these people are gunning to be that employee, to be that person
Hmm.
that stands out in hundreds of applications.
Hmm.
So I'm sure that, see, I think that there's not going to be anybody who will do this relentlessly unless there's some incentive at the end. There has to be light at
Yeah.
the end of the tunnel, right? So I'm sure that people are already facing the incentives of constantly posting. There's also an interesting idea that just came to me. I think with a lot of people with their careers, maybe posting on LinkedIn, talking about their work life, talking about their gains and their failures and their wisdom and all of that, maybe that is the one thing that is kind of creative about their careers.
Hmm.
It's possible that
Yeah.
a lot of these people actually have jobs that may or may not be that inspiring, and
Yeah.
maybe talking about it on LinkedIn is the way that they want to seem cool.
Could be. Could be. Definitely.
So it could also be a self-driven kind of thing.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily be extrinsic, maybe it's intrinsic.
It could be a combination. It could be market forces, it could be algorithms, it could be intrinsic need, as you talked about, and it could be boredom, it could be extra time because of the pandemic, it could be all of the above, none of the above. It could be mimetic. We like to, have you heard of Rene Girard's mimetic theory? We basically copy
Copy
the
each
people
other,
we look
yeah.
up to all the time.
Hmm.
And the more we say we don't copy, we're actually probably doing that much more. Yeah, listeners should definitely check out Gerard's work. But yeah, we do absolutely. Influences are a thing because they do influence to some extent behavior. So just wrapping it up, Neerja, for say a millennial or a Gen Z, I think he or she would be thoroughly confused right now listening to or reading your article, listening to it. They would have so much to think about. How should they, or how might they think about it? Try to be as less prescriptive as possible in a very
Uh-huh.
prescriptive question.
All right. Okay. So I'll go back to what started my whole, train of thought about work and how we
Hmm.
think of work. And I read this column by Sabrina Oramak, which she writes in the Paris Review. And it's about how she's looking for a professorship at the turn of the pandemic, so just before the pandemic.
Hmm.
And she applies to a couple of universities in the US and she doesn't get it, and she feels incredibly depressed about it. She goes back home. The pandemic hits, and countless people in the US lose their jobs. And she finds herself in this position where she begins to ask, I'm a writer who writes about fairy tales. I'm trying to create a course about it that I can teach at an actual university. I have failed so far. What's the point of the work I do? Is there any utility to the work I do?
Hmm. Hmm.
What is the point of what I'm doing? And the recurring motive in this essay is I should have learned how to bake bread. Because when, shit hits the fan and when you're in a bad situation, you wonder what is the point of me being a writer? I should have learned how to bake bread. At least I would be alive. I would be able to feed myself.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where I feel like I need to explain this to people, to explain where I'm operating from. My parents are dentists and they've always had to work with their hands. They had to use their degree every single day of their life. And I think about my job sometimes, and I think about, okay, I'm sitting behind a laptop and I'm basically thinking thoughts and putting them down. So I've also had that experience where I've been like, what's the point of what I'm doing? So I think it's important to think about our jobs with respect to the utility of our jobs, with respect to how are we contributing to a particular environment, what are we doing as work,
Hmm.
and what is the joy that you're deriving out of work. And that might lead to interesting conversations about how am I spending my time?
Right.
What am I doing in this
Fascinating.
job? Is it becoming the center of my life? Is that something I want?
Yeah. Um, well, this has been fascinating. Will we see you as a LinkedIn influencer with your articles becoming so popular online? Will you
I think I
start with
spend too much time on Google Docs writing up drafts
it? So,
to have the time to be an influencer on LinkedIn. No, but I feel like anybody with an audience, an open audience on social media, is kind of like they have their audience, they do their curation. In a
yeah,
sense, we're all kind of participating in that economy, even though we may not be influencers.
yeah,
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's important to have your feet on the ground.
agree. Well, Neerja, we hope you keep writing and influencing us all with your ideas and thoughts. We definitely look forward to having you back with us on Network Capital. It was a fascinating article. Thank you for
It was
making us
lovely
all
speaking to
think.
you, Utkarsh. Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. See you soon. Bye.
See
Take
you.
care.